Hello guys, welcome back in Goku Manhwa channel. Let's continue. They had been caught up in a private, heated moment, both of them lost in the intensity of what they were doing. Seon was overwhelmed by her own reactions, caught between shock and shyness, feeling a rush that made her heart pound. She had been having the time of her life, swept into the moment so quickly that she barely processed how bold it all felt. But then, when she suddenly focused on Jungwook, she realized how intensely passionate he looked. The sight startled her so much that her embarrassment turned into a burst of playful aggression. Out of instinct and flustered energy, she swung her hand and gave him a playful punch. The punch ended up being much stronger than she intended, catching them both off guard. Jungwook reacted immediately, letting out a sharp sound of pain while rubbing the spot she hit. Seon froze for a second, watching him and wondering if she had gone too far. The flustered panic mixed with leftover excitement from earlier made her stumble around while picking up a blue t-shirt. She kept glancing at him as he held his head, feeling guilty but also unable to stop laughing nervously at the absurdity of the entire moment. Finally, she muttered an apology while still half laughing, and then she fled the situation entirely, telling herself it was her first time dealing with something like this and she had no idea how to handle it properly. By the next morning, her face showed the consequences of that chaotic night. Both her eyes were swollen, forming dark circles that made her look like she hadn't slept at all. She stared at herself in disbelief, mentally replaying everything and realizing she truly had not slept even for a moment. When she stepped into the kitchen, she immediately saw Aunt Meija already busy with the morning routine. Seon asked how she had slept and felt relieved when Aunt Meija answered casually. But the moment Aunt Meija turned and really looked at her face, she froze. The swelling around Seon's eyes made her look exhausted and troubled, and Aunt Meija wondered aloud if she had been unable to sleep. Seon tried to explain that she was particular about her sleeping environment, and that she believed she would adjust starting today. But as she stood there, Aunt Meija stared again, this time noticing the blue t-shirt Seon was wearing. Recognition flashed across her face, and she asked if it wasn't Jungwook's shirt. Seon's heart skipped a beat. She scrambled to cover the situation, claiming she had woken up half asleep at night to get water, spilled some, and grabbed any clothing nearby. Before she could say more, Jungwook appeared behind her without warning. His sudden presence made the air heavy and awkward, and both of them looked tense while Aunt Meija simply nodded and shifted the conversation away. Seon wondered how he managed to appear at the worst possible moment and reminded herself that avoiding him might be the safest option for now. She excused herself and said she would go take a shower. Aunt Meija reminded her that she had heard from Seon's mother about her wanting to help at the orchard, and that she and Uncle would be waiting outside once she was ready. Seon agreed and left the kitchen. After her shower, she dressed properly, feeling more composed. The chaotic night, the swollen eyes, the awkward encounter in the kitchen, all of it left her feeling unsettled. But at the same time, finally having a task to focus on made her feel relieved. In a strange way, everything that happened ended up pushing her into starting her day with more clarity than she expected. Seon stepped out of her room with a burst of energy, telling herself that she was going to pluck a whole ton of apples today and shake off everything that had been weighing on her. The excitement made her feel lighter, as if the work in the orchard would reset her mind. She opened the door enthusiastically and called out for Aunt Meija, expecting to see her waiting. But instead, Jungwook appeared again, filling the doorway with his tall, bulky frame. The sudden sight of him startled her so much that she shut the door instantly, almost like a little kid trying to avoid someone. She pressed her back against the door and murmured to herself that it looked like Aunt Meija wasn't there, deciding she would just leave before anything awkward happened. Before she could escape, the door pushed open again from the other side. Jungwook leaned in, teasing her, blocking her attempt to run away. She tried to pull the door closed and told him to let it go, but he kept holding onto it, clearly enjoying the way she flustered so easily around him. She tried to distract him by bringing up Aunt Meija and her uncle, wondering where they were. Jungwook explained that they had gone into town for some business. Seon remembered that Aunt Meija had said they would all be going to the orchard together, and she tried to confirm that plan. Jungwook said that Aunt Meija had indeed mentioned it, but things had changed. He told her that Aunt and Uncle had asked him to teach her how to work in the orchard instead, and that they would be back only after dinner. The responsibility was now entirely on him. Seon froze for a moment as the realization hit her. The entire day would be spent alone with Jungwook. The thought made her heart race with nervousness. She wasn't mentally prepared for this at all, especially after everything that happened the night before. It felt like both of them wanted to keep some distance, Yet there was an undeniable pull that neither fully knew how to handle. As they stood facing each other, Jungwook stepped closer. The distance between them shrank slowly but surely. Then he suddenly bent down in front of her. Seon was completely shocked by the movement and had no idea what he was trying to do. She stared at him, confused and tense, wondering why he was lowering himself and what he was reaching for. Jungwook quietly reminded her that the two of them were in a relationship, that they were already connected in a way that made moments like this feel natural. The words made Seon's face heat up instantly, and she turned her gaze away in pure shyness, unable to look at him for a moment. In her mind, she replayed everything that had happened between them the previous day, and the similarity made her so flustered that she almost raised her hand to hit him again out of instinct. She didn't swing this time, but the impulse was there, making her even more embarrassed. When she finally looked back at him, a vivid memory slipped into her thoughts. A scene from their childhood flashed before her. It felt like just yesterday when Jungwook didn't even know how to tie his shoes properly. She remembered a younger version of him standing helplessly with loose shoelaces, waiting for someone to fix them. And she was the one who always crouched down to tie them for him, sighing at how he never seemed to learn. Even now, recalling it made her mutter internally about how he would always ask her to do it for him. She sat down, covering her face for a moment, realizing how embarrassing it felt to think about those old moments now, especially after everything happening between them in the present. Jungwook, meanwhile, was completely lost, watching her with a clueless expression as if he couldn't understand the sudden flood of emotion she was experiencing. Then he abruptly stood up, and she found herself thinking about how cheesy the whole situation felt, mostly because she was too shy to handle it properly. He eventually stood fully straight and turned away, beginning to walk off. She lifted her head, confused, and asked where he was going so suddenly. He explained he was heading to the orchard to start working, acting as if it was nothing unusual. His sudden departure annoyed her. She didn't want him walking away alone like that, especially not after all the awkwardness between them. With a mix of frustration and hesitation, she demanded that they go together, insisting he shouldn't just leave her behind. Right before he walked off completely, she called out again, reminding him about equipment. She wondered how he planned to work without any tools. Jungwook told her that everything they needed was already at the orchard, and then he continued walking ahead. They eventually reached the orchard side by side. When Seon stepped inside and saw the rows of large, bright red apples hanging heavily from the branches, her entire expression changed. Her eyes lit up with excitement, and she looked around like a child seeing something wonderful for the first time. She thought to herself about how huge and beautiful the apples were, unable to hide her happiness. But as she glanced at Jungwook again, her mood shifted slightly. He seemed a bit too calm, too indifferent, almost pretentious in the way he ignored her excitement. His behavior irritated her, making her feel as if he was intentionally not paying attention. The quiet annoyance simmered in her chest as she stood among the apple trees, admiring the orchard while being just a little mad at him. Seon grew increasingly irritated the more she watched Jungwook behave as if nothing had happened between them. Just that same morning, he had been lingering near her, watching her closely, almost glaring at her every move. But now, in the orchard, he barely acknowledged her existence. The sudden shift felt jarring, and it made her wonder why he was acting so indifferent. She questioned whether he was ignoring her because her earlier reactions had seemed too childish. She had never worked in a place like this before, and maybe her excitement over the apples made her look inexperienced. Her mind drifted back to their past. Jungwook had been extremely popular during their high school days, constantly surrounded by girls who found him charming. He often seemed embarrassed to even greet his own childhood friend, with her standing right there. Remembering that made her clench her jaw. His popularity, his confidence, and the way everyone adored him, all of it made this cold attitude easier to understand. She thought that maybe it was for the best. If he kept acting like he barely knew her, then whatever happened last night wouldn't repeat itself. It was safer this way, she told herself. She straightened herself and stepped closer to him, determined to reset her mindset. The orchard was bright and warm under the sun. The red apples hanging everywhere looked almost cute, creating a soft, calming scene. She reminded herself that she needed to treat yesterday like nothing more than a half-forgotten dream. She wanted to return to the peaceful version of her orchard life, the one she had imagined before everything became complicated. But just as she settled into that thought, he called her name suddenly. She turned toward him, meeting his eyes. He looked at her once, then again, as if searching for something in her expression. She stared back, confused. The way he was looking at her brought back memories of the previous night without warning. Her heartbeat tightened, and she instinctively pressed her hand against her chest to steady herself. Then he asked her about the item she had been carrying the night before, the one he had teased her about. His question caught her completely off guard. She froze, unable to understand why he would bring that up here, in the orchard, of all places. She tried to make sense of his words, but embarrassment flooded her face before she managed to respond. For a moment, she wondered if she had accidentally hit him too hard the previous night, and maybe he wasn't thinking straight. She asked him what he meant, but he stepped closer instead of answering clearly. He wanted to know if she had used the item after going back to her room, and if she had enjoyed it while thinking about him. The closeness between them grew uncomfortably intense. She backed up until her shoulders touched the trunk of a tree, needing something to hold her steady. He leaned in, closing the remaining space between them with slow steps. His expression held an unmistakable sense of expectation, almost hopeful. Meanwhile, her own expression softened involuntarily. Her eyes widened slightly, looking up at him with an almost gentle, helpless gaze. There were so many things she wanted to say, but none of the words managed to leave her lips. She stayed silent, frozen between confusion, embarrassment, and the weight of his presence.